All right, we are live. All right, thank you for joining us. If you're joining us live now, or if you're watching this later, Heather and I are excited to and grateful to welcome Rick Lyman with us today, a dad of a PDAer and also a PDA daughter and also an autistic son. We're focusing on his daughter today, just because obviously that's our focus at Journeys with PDA. Rick's wife, Carissa, has joined us in our morning coffee chats for, well over a year, I think, probably from one of the beginning ones we ever had. So she was gracious enough to offer you up, Rick.
Yeah.
and
Well,
you were grateful enough to accept. So Heather and I just get a lot of comments from moms in our groups as far as sometimes it's hard for dads to maybe either get on board with PDA parenting or just understanding it. And so we thought that it would be great if we could have a dad of a PDAer come on and just kind of talk about his experience parenting a PDAer. And so I also want to say, before I forget, is we are also starting we're called Meet Us in the Dad's Den. And we're starting our first, it's similar to our morning coffee and evening chats where we do have dads join us on occasion, but this is going to be focused specifically for dads. So the only females in the group will be Heather and or I, just to facilitate. But the first one is scheduled for Sunday, April 3rd at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. So if anybody wants to join us for that, any dads out there, or grandpas, uncles, any males that want to learn more about PDA and just communicate with one another about that experience, we'd love to have you join us, and you can just email us for the Zoom link. That being said, Rick, would you just take a minute to kind of introduce yourself and tell us kind of about your family and kind of when your journey with PDA started?
yeah, you bet. So my name is Rick Lyman. My wife is Carissa Lyman, and Jaden is our daughter, and she's 12. And so I guess probably the best place for me to start about Jaden was be basically from day one, from birth. She was a C-section, and so and she was a preemie, so she was probably like 5 or 6 weeks early, so she was a preemie. And so after she was born, it was, I think, maybe like the second or third night, one of the nurses had brought Jaden into the room where we were staying at the hospital and said, "Oh, well, do you want to, you want to feed the baby and have the baby sleep in here with you guys tonight or whatever?" We said, "Okay, sure." So the baby, Jaden, came in. We fed the baby, fed Jaden. We're holding her and snuggling her, doing all the stuff. Well, she had just, like, after all that, she kind of just started screaming and was just like screaming for probably 2 or 3 hours straight. And we didn't know what to do. Like, she was changed, fed, holding her, nurturing her, all these things. And after about 2 or 3 hours, one of the nurses finally came in and said, "Well, I hear your baby's been screaming for a long time. Do you want me to take her back to the nursery so that you guys can get some rest?" And we're like, "Yeah, like, we don't know, like, this is our first kid. We don't know what's going on. Is this normal? What's happening?" So that was our first experience with Jaden. And then we had brought her home, and Carissa was home from work with Jaden, and Jaden, same thing. Jaden, she wouldn't sleep at night. She was, up 2-3 times a night, just screaming for an hour or two at a time. And we'd have to hold her. And me and Carissa would take turns night after night doing it. And eventually, after like a year, probably the first year or so, Carissa, we couldn't have Jaden in our bedroom with her. We had to have her in a pack and play because she would scream, literally just scream all night and wouldn't sleep. She'd maybe sleep for an hour at a time, 2 hours to wake up, and ended up putting out her in a pack and play out in the living room. And I ended up spending probably a year or two just sleeping on the couch almost every night, just trying to take care of Jaden because she just wouldn't sleep. And basically, Jaden didn't sleep a full night until she was about age 4, I think, age 4 or 5. She finally slept a full night. And it was weird because it was like up every night with her. And then all of a sudden it was like, we put her to bed one night and she slept all night. And we're like, wow, like, this is amazing. Maybe like we got through this, maybe something changed, but she's always been very like demanding, like needing constant attention, like either our attention or with her brother, or just constant, just never wants to leave anybody alone. So we had put her in a I guess it'd be like a kindergarten preschool type school, and she was doing well with there because they were kind of keeping her busy and stuff. But she would she would have meltdowns. She still have a lot of meltdowns and fits about things at home. Some of those fits I don't remember really well because it was so long ago, and we've had so many since that really in my mind it's like this was Jaden from day one, and she's been just a constant 24 hours like I want to say drained, but like taking energy and time and focus, and just like everything has to be focused on Jaden all the time. And it's been like that for 12 years. And we're like, I don't know, maybe kids are like this. We don't know. And then come to find out like, well, most kids don't need all of that attention all the time. And they can kind of go off and play by themselves and do their own thing. We had Jaden in her own bedroom, and everything was right across the hall from ours. And she would start throwing these fits and tantrums, and we couldn't do anything with her. So we'd put her in her bedroom. And when we'd come back to the bedroom, and she would just have it completely destroyed. After like an hour or two of her, throwing a fit and tantrums and being on us, we just put her in a room and say, we'll go play or whatever. We'd come into the room, and the room would just be totally destroyed. And we had to take out furniture. We had to take out a lot of the stuff in there because she would just wreck everything. So that's kind of how it started with Jaden. It's from day one, she's been, a constant need. So.
And so, how old I know, but the people watching don't, remind me, but tell others, how old was she when you learned about PDA then?
Okay. Yeah. So Jaden is 12 now. When we learned about PDA, she was 10. So it's probably just about 2 years ago, right? It's probably really close to 2 years ago. She'd been going to school, and it's funny because she does good at school. Like she was going to school and public school, doing a good job, and teachers loved her. She was kind of a little bit behind, I think, reading and some math and some things like that. So she'd go to school, was fine, but then she would come home, and it was like she had all this stuff built up in her, and it would just spew all over us. Like everything became my fault and Carissa's fault and her brother's fault, especially her brother. She really focused in on her brother. It's always his fault. And so she would always come home, and basically I would say probably 4, maybe 5 nights a week, we would have major meltdown fits where she would tear the couch cushions off the couch and just destroy the living room. And I would just have to sit there and take verbal abuse from her while she was throwing these fits. And it would take hours and hours and hours. And it kind of came to the point where she was, and maybe I can talk about this a little bit later or right now, I'm not sure, but we were trying to keep her really structured. We like to have things really clean and tidy and neat, especially Carissa. She's very organized and very structured. And so we like to have discipline, and we like to have everything in order. And so trying to get her to just, Jaden, would you do the dishes tonight? I can't do the dishes. I can't, it's too much. But then she would also, along with I can't do it, she would get stuck between a wall. She would say, well, I can't do it, so I'm mad because I can't do it. So then I would say, well, then don't do it. It's okay. Just don't do it. And then she would get mad at this wall because, well, now you're mad at me because I won't do it. So there was no getting around her frustration, her anger with it. And so she'd kind of started to get angry and kind of talk about self-harming. And it was kind of at that point we were like, this isn't good. She's very sweet, always been very sweet. And she kind of was talking about doing some self-harm stuff. And, she's a 10. I'm like, you have a great life. Mommy and daddy love you, and you have all the things in the world just available to you. Why? There's the only reason that you're getting upset and mad is because there's something wrong, inside. And so what happened is she was just on a run of fits, probably 5-6 nights in a row where I was up till midnight, almost every night, starting from 9 o'clock till midnight every night. her throwing a fit. And finally it got to the point where like, we don't know what to do. Carissa had been talking to, I think one of the counselors, maybe at PDAer, and they had said, if she gets out of control and you can't deal with the fit, you need to bring her to the ER. And like, we were scared to death. Like, we were like, man, we don't want to do that. Like, that's scary. And it hurts. And so there was one night, and it was just like, we're just like, we had enough. Like, she was threatening to hurt herself and screaming. And it was probably 12 o'clock at night, and screaming and screaming, and she wouldn't stop. And we're like, if you don't stop, like, we have to take you in, we have to do something. And so Carissa took her to the ER, and it was a horrible night. Like, it scared Jaden really bad. And it was hard for us, but it was kind of a breaking point of like, okay, like, there's something going on here that we can't fix ourselves, and we can't like discipline out of her. And so we need to do something about that. And so we had taken her to the ER. And finally, once we took her to the ER, PDAer was like, okay, we see that there's a problem. And we had brought her into PDAer probably that same week, maybe just a couple days later. And they started just asking her some questions and maybe doing some tests just to kind of find out what's going on with her. So that's kind of how we got started with figuring out down this road about like, what actually is it that's going on that we don't know. Like, we don't know what to do about it. We're going down a bad road here, and like, the road is getting real ugly really fast. So we gotta make a turn here and go somewhere else. So that was about 2 years ago.
And, listening to you talk about that, I noticed somebody made a comment that they can so relate to what you were saying. And, our story isn't exactly the same, but I think a lot of PDA parents have gotten to that point because PDA isn't well known in the US. But with the help of your wife, we're trying to make a difference about that. But getting to that point of desperation, like, I don't know what to do. You feel like you're a good parent, you feel like you're loving, you feel like you're doing all the things you're supposed to do as a parent, and it literally, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So when was it that you we kind of call it the paradigm shift, or the change in your thinking, like that you learned enough about PDA that you learned that, wait, this is actually about us changing our parenting rather than us trying to fix or change Jaden, because that really is where the change, I think, for all of us, that's where it starts, is us as parents really realizing we have to change, and then in response, our kids start to change.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, trying to fit Jaden into that, that box, that proverbial box, right? Trying to fit her into like every kid. This is just how I was. This is how all kids are. This is how you should be. And yeah, so at that, after we had done the PDAer, and she had gone back in, and she had met with maybe the psychiatrist there. And they thought, well, maybe maybe she's bipolar, but she really she had the bipolar stuff, because one minute she's feeling fantastic. And it's funny too, because after these big fits, she would just blow off steam for hours. And then maybe like for like a day or two, she would just be the greatest kid, so happy. As long as I didn't ask her to do something, right? Like to do the dishes or something, she would just be the happiest kid, and mood was fantastic for probably a day or two until it all built up. And then she popped her top again. And so they thought, well, maybe she's bipolar. And so we kind of looked into that, and it was like, kind of, but it doesn't really fit into that box. And maybe it's this or that. Mm-hmm. And then, it was actually really like, I don't know, I use the word miraculous maybe, but there was a woman there, Melissa Neff, and you guys know her, of course, but she happened to be at PDAer for a short period of time, where we had come in, and Melissa kind of talked to Jaden and did some stuff, and she goes, I think maybe Jaden has this thing called PDA. It's kind of a new thing people are figuring out, and I think in England maybe, or Europe, England, something like that. They know about it, and it's kind of becoming a thing that they're actually seeing and recognizing that it's a real thing, and type of autism. And so Melissa had said, okay, well, maybe start looking into PDA. Here's here's a book that she wrote, or someone wrote about it. And so as soon as we started reading that book, and it started talking about the behaviors and like what it was, we're just like, whoa, like 10 years, we didn't have a clue what was going on. We're like, well, maybe she is autistic, maybe, or maybe she's just strong-willed, that was the thing, is like, oh, she's just strong-willed kid. That was always the thought for the first 10 years, is she just got her own mind and she's a go-getter and she got fire in her belly, and then once we started reading that thing about PDA, it was just like the lights went off and like the cloud lifted, and it was like, oh my gosh, like, yes, like this is what Jaden has. And so once we found that out about what PDA is and how it basically, like, what the needs that she needs goes completely against like our natural tendencies and parenting styles, and what our natural instincts are to raise a kid. And we started doing that. It was like we started to see a change in Jaden. Like, okay, like, yeah, like the discipline and the force and the trying to kind of move her along and whip her into shape, so to speak. Like that only regresses and makes it worse. Like we had to step back and kind of just let her be and kind of just exist and just be loved, and not place those demands on her. And so that was 2 years ago, and I think that was probably in like November, maybe November, a little over 2 years ago, something like that. And so we're like, well, we're just going to kind of go all in with Jaden and see what happens, because we were just beat down. I mean, we had nothing left. Like, we didn't know what to do. We're like, are we gonna have to send her away somewhere because we can't live with this? And so we took her out of school. I think halfway through a school year, maybe towards the end of the school year, it was like February, March, we took her out, and we're just like, me and Carissa were like, we didn't want her having an iPad. We don't want you having TV. We don't want you having all this stuff. Like, you're not going to sit around and watch TV all day. Like, you got to be out doing something, like being a, productive human being. And so like, we're always been totally against the iPads and the phones and the TVs and all this stuff. And well, it was like, well, the only thing that's going to keep Jaden from getting, pushed over the top is like, we got to take her out of school and take that demand off of her. And this is just such a weird thing. Like, people are going to think we're horrible people. Like, we're neglectful, lazy parents, because like, oh, we don't want our kid to go to school, just because, so we're like, well, people are going to think we're, crazy and lazy. And I think one of the people said, you should probably get her an iPad so she has, something to watch. And for us, we're like, like, man, like, I feel like that's going to make it worse, because, if a kid just sits on their iPad all day, they're not ever going to become anything in life. But we're at the point where we're like, well, we don't care. We're willing to try anything. And so we did. We got her the iPad. We took her out of school. And I mean, it was like, probably with just maybe a few weeks of her doing that, like the tantrums, we're probably having maybe one fit a week, maybe one, maybe two. And from that point on, the tantrums started becoming a little more spaced out and maybe not quite as severe. And the more we learned about it, like, the more we could see, okay, like, it's not really like her being strong-willed or anything like that. It was more of like just how she reacts to the pressure and the circumstances that are being placed on her, and realizing that, like, if we can minimize that pressure, then like she can handle it better, and she can deal with herself just a little bit better. I think there's a lot of anxiety that goes along with it. Like I said, she gets stuck between a wall of like, I can't do it, so I'm upset, but then I'm also upset that I can't do it because you're going to be upset. And so like, when you can kind of take that pressure off, then she can kind of start to see how she's feeling and all that. So yeah, it was an eye opener, and it was really just that little bit of hope, and that little bit of like, somebody kind of knows what's going on with her, was like, oh yes, like, okay, like, we can start taking these steps and doing this, whether it looks ridiculous to other people or not. Like, it doesn't matter, because our lives are miserable anyway. Right. So we don't care. Like, we're willing to do anything, and for her own good too. Like, I mean, it was so sad, like, just to see the hurt in her eyes, like, like right before we started taking her in, just really, really sad and really hurting, because I think at 10, she's kind of becoming a little more self-aware of like her and her surroundings and her feelings and stuff. And like, just the sadness, like, I never really had seen the sadness and the hurt, until about age 10. And like, it's horrible. Like, I couldn't even, like couldn't even see it in her eyes. Like I'd do anything. I'll take her out of school and she never go to school again as long as, she was happy and not, turning into a miserable human being.
And, it's interesting that you say that, Rick, because, our kiddos, once we know about PDA, we realize that this isn't willful. They're not choosing these behaviors. And so the sadness that you speak of in her eyes, she doesn't want to act the way she's acting or treat you and Carissa and her brother the way she's treating them. It's literally the way her brain is wired. And so I think that is so important for people to understand with PDA, is that this is not willful and it is not a choice. It is the way their brain is wired, and it is the way their brain tells them to respond and react. And the other thing that you said was, she said, I can't. She didn't say I won't do it. She said I can't do it.
Yep.
And that is a big takeaway again with PDA, is that they literally don't feel like they can do something. It's not like, I've got the 14-year-old high school boy who, if I say, hey, you need to unload the dishwasher, which right there, that's a demand. I realize, but he's not my PDAer. He might not want to, but his would be more like, I won't, like, I'm not going to do it, versus, his is always like, can I do it later? To where if I ask my younger son, the PDAer, hey, I see the dishes are clean in the dishwasher. Wonder if we could put those away. Depending on where he is, it might be a can't. And that's because his brain is telling him, for whatever reason, it's a threat or that he can't do it. So it's just interesting to me to listen to a PDA dad, and you're saying all the things that we know about PDAers and that are in the books. And it's not that you're not telling us this from a book, you're telling us from your own life. And so we talk about that a lot, that there's a thread that weaves in through all of our stories. We're not, my Drew isn't exactly like your Jaden, and your Jaden isn't exactly like Heather's Will, but there's so many similarities.
Similarities, I don't mean to interrupt, but when you were describing Jaden's infanthood, that was us. We couldn't put him down. We didn't put him down for probably like the first 5 months of his life. I mean, he was held, he couldn't be satiated with anything. And it was miserable for him. It was miserable for us. And yeah, I'm with you. I felt that one all the way down.
Yeah. Well, and when you don't know what
right.
it is, you're just like, you're grasping at straws and trying everything you can try,
Right. And you're reading like Happiest Baby on the Block. And you're reading, and your pediatrician, you're taking them in for, their whatever month checkup, and they're, well, where does your child sleep? And you're like, well, he sleeps with me, because if he doesn't, nobody else would sleep, and
exactly.
And then you're like, you feel like you're an in the closet co-sleeper, because everybody's telling you one thing, and that's just like the beginning of in the closet parenting you feel like you have to do, until you figure out, oh my gosh, it's PDA, and those changes you need to make.
Yeah
Felt that one.
Yeah, there's other people making comments that they can totally relate. So that's when people try to say that PDA isn't real. I'm gonna say, okay, let you talk to some other PDA parents.
Yeah.
Let's see if it's real or not.
Totally. Well, especially when you've exhausted all options, really, like everything, like you tried everything in the book that in the normal book anyway, of what you're supposed to do. And when none of it works, you're a total loss, and you're confused, and it's scary.
Yep. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Anne. I interrupted
you. Oh no,
you
of course.
Mid thought.
Rick, one thing that we hear a lot about from dads, or honestly from moms, is that it's hard for dads to get on board sometimes with their child having the control. And those of us that have been on the journey for, a longer period of time, and And so this is not being judgmental about any dads, because we all started somewhere and, are on our journey. And just those of us that are further along and understand it more, it makes a difference. But so dads are supposed to be, head of the household, and you're supposed to be masculine, and you're supposed to be in charge and all those things. And PDA ultimately turns that on its head, because our PDAers, due to their high anxiety, and always feeling like everything is a threat, they need to be in control. And so therefore that takes your control as a parent, mom and dad. But, dads are just supposed to be seen as, kind of in charge and the head of the household. Can you just talk to that a little bit, as far as, was that hard for you, or, just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So, I guess first thing is, like, for me as a man and as a dad, like, for up until that first 10 years, like I said, I didn't want to deny that there was a problem, but I didn't want to accept that maybe it was a bigger problem than I could actually handle myself, or that we could, like, work through if we just kept working at it and kept loving her and kept moving, forward. And so it was like, I personally maybe didn't want to recognize that until, like I said, I could start seeing the sadness and the hurt that it wasn't working, because I'm like, yeah, like let's just wait a little bit longer. Like, don't take, I'm like, as a guy, we're like, I don't want to go to the doctor. Like, unless I'm dying, like, I'm not going to the doctor. Right. So it's like, Chris was like, well, there's something wrong. I want to take her in. I'm like, no, like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't, like, it's going to ruin her. And that was one thing that night we took her to the hospital, is like, my wife's parents were like, it's going to ruin her life. And she's like, you're ruining my life, and everything's being ruined here. And so for me, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, no, kind of fighting Carissa, and it would make me upset, and having those conversations with my wife about it, because, she's wanting to do this and take this step and look into this and look into that, go to this doctor, go to that doctor, and find these things out. And I'm just like, like, very hesitant towards it, just because maybe it hurt my pride a little bit, because I'm like, I should be able to handle this and deal with it. And, she is my daughter, and she should listen to me, and she should obey. And again, like, my pride said, I don't want to admit, like, that she has a problem. I don't want her to be labeled, right? Was the thing, is I don't want people to put a label on her, as not necessarily disabled, but whatever that label is, autistic or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hesitancy and a lot of, like, not animosity towards my wife, but just like that feeling of like, I kind of think we should do something, but I don't want to. Like, I'm gonna, like, disagree with you because I don't want to deal with that. So, and like I said, until I saw that point of where she was just not growing and just regressing, basically, was like, okay, like, at this point, like, I have to personally take a hit to my own pride and to my own wants to kind of go along with what Jaden needs. And then also with, being a dad and wanting to be in charge of, the kids, and making sure that they're doing, what they're supposed to be doing, listening to mom, listening to me, and respecting and all of that with these PDA kids, is like we talked about, is they don't necessarily want to be, like, mean, not Jaden. I'll speak for Jaden. Like, she's got a great heart. She has such a good heart. And I don't think she's trying to be disrespectful to me. But when she gets in that mode, that mode where she's just ready to pop and blow, it is like that disrespect coming to me towards a man. My natural instinct is to fight, right? So, like, my instinct towards her was becoming like, I can sit here for an hour and listen to you scream and yell at me and throw a fit and not listen to anything I say and argue with me. But after that, it was like, I want to get angry, and, like, I want to hurt you, basically. Like, I want to hurt you. Even when she was a little kid, it was like, I'm spending, 5 hours in the middle of the night with this kid, and it won't stop screaming. And, they do the purple cry thing, right? That they do at the hospital. They talk about, I think it's purple cry. Anyway, and they start talking about that, and it's like, oh my gosh, like, this is a real thing. Like, holy cow, like, this is like an attack on me, and I feel like I need to do something about it. And so, for me personally as a man, like it was hard for me to not love Jaden. Like I love her all the time, but when she comes against me with like, I feel I'm being disrespected or not listened to, and she won't do what I say, I feel like I just like the anger, like I get angry. And for me, it's like, okay, I have to be able to separate like Jaden's diagnosis, like her PDA, from who she actually is as a person, because that part of her isn't attacking me as her dad, who she loves enormously. And she almost always apologizes and she says, I love you, Daddy. I'm so sorry. And so like I have to be able to recognize that and be able to just show her love and show her that compassion. And it's shown me to have just so much patience, like to have so much patience to be with her and just to listen to her and just love on her, I guess, and not try to let my fight or flight and response kind of act up when she does that. So that's yeah.
I mean, and that takes work. That takes a whole lot of work.
It's really hard. And so like, you see like if luckily for us, I mean, I think a lot of PDA kids are like this too. When they go out into public, they mask, right? They do the masking thing and people are like, oh man, you got great kids. Like they're fantastic. Right. And you're like, like, no, they're kind of not, like, yes, they are, but like, they're not. And so like you want your kids to portray you as a parent, as a good parent and a loving parent and stuff. And so as a man, I'm like, I want, I don't want, and this was something I had to deal with, is I just don't want people seeing me as like a weak parent or a lazy, probably more of like, oh, you're just being lazy type thing.
Yeah, because you're letting your kid get away with things, and yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, letting go.
Exactly.
Yeah, letting go of that parent to parent, peer to peer guilt, and judgment. Because I've said a zillion times before, I was a perfect parent before I had my son. I knew exactly how I was going to parent. I would, observe other people and other situations with their kids, and I was less than graceful in my thoughts. And now I'm just like, oh, sister, do you need some help? Because I've been there. I have been there.
Yes, totally.
Rick, what changes have you seen in Jaden since you and Carissa have changed your parenting to support her as a PDAer? You've talked about like the sadness and those things previously. What kind of changes have you seen, whether it be the challenging behaviors or her mood, or what positive changes have you seen since you all, and in your life in general? I mean, I know for us, we always say when Drew's happy, the rest of us are happy. Yeah. So, it affects the whole household. It's not just you, but what changes have you seen in Jaden and just in your family since you and Carissa figured out PDA and have changed your parenting to support her?
Yeah. So, when we first took her out of school, it was like, okay, well, we're gonna try to homeschool. We're gonna try to teach her some stuff at home, like maybe she's at home. So literally we would sit there and Carissa would sit there for an hour trying to teach Jaden just a simple, like, okay, here's 2 math problems. Can we do these? And Jaden would just writhe and round on the couch, just writhing. I can't do it. So then I would come in. After Carissa was so upset, I would come in and try to show her. And then for like another hour, she would just writhe around and just like, I can't, and just impossible and frustrating and an energy drain, just as you guys know, like just draining every bit of ambition and energy and life out of you is just being poured into these kids, trying to keep them going. And so once we decided, okay, homeschool is not working, we're just going to lay back for like a year and like just kind of let you cool off and relax and lay back. And so gradually it kind of started, like I said, we had less meltdowns, even though we still had them. We were having 1, maybe 2 a week, and they were 2-3 hours long, and somehow they always start at like 8-9 o'clock at night. I don't know why that is, but because I'm ready to go to bed, right? So like you get one or two a night, or 1 or 2 a week, excuse me, and they kind of started to calm down. Like she was able to listen to us a little bit better. and kind of like rationalize what we're telling her, because you know these kids, like they're ration once they get in that mode, they don't really rationalize. And even if they're just normal, like they don't want to think rationally, they just want to think how they perceive it and argue their own point, whether it's right or completely incorrect. They want to see themselves as right. And so she was able to kind of start listening a little bit better. And she was doing some things at Shodair. I can't remember exactly what she's doing over there. A couple of things they're helping her with. But just taking away that demand was, I think, taking a lot of anxiety and pressure off of her. So she wasn't building that pressure, like that pressure pot, right? That pressure cooker. So we were kind of like able to release it slowly instead of it building and then just blowing off. Like when we're doing the at home and she's on her iPad, like there's points like in the afternoons where we could kind of let her release that pressure a little bit at a time, so we didn't have the big blow up. So that kind of started. And now we're 2 years, like I said, we're 2 years into this, and probably with just in the last 6 months, 8 months, I've really noticed a big decrease in the frequency of these meltdowns. So up until probably like these last 2 weeks, we put Jaden back in public school full time, and so it's been hard, and we've had several big blowups over the last couple of weeks because of it. But past 6-8 months, she's probably only had we were going to stretch of maybe like 3 to 4 weeks at a time before she would have a big blow up, even though like on the daily she would be, kind of like argue with everything. And like she does like I don't know, she'll spill something and she'll just start to get all upset and mad. And it's like, just like, calm down, it's fine, like I'll help you clean it up, it's okay. So she does that, and like you ask her to do something and she rolls her eyes and gets mad and upset, and but the meltdowns have decreased, and the her ability to how do I want to put this, accept our help, I guess, because like we're trying to help. We're like, let us help you, like just hug me, give me a hug, like tell me what's wrong, like just like let me help you. Her ability to listen and to accept the help has kind of increased. And so she just had a blow up here probably like 2 or 3 days ago. And usually the way it would go is she would go so far, and she's like, Chris is like, I can't do anything for you because you won't let me help you. Like I'm trying to help you and you won't let me. And so that's when I come in, and then I have to get mad and I have to raise my voice. And like for me, what ended up happening, a year or two ago, is Jaden gets in that thing where she'll just go for hours and hours and hours and just round and around on the same thing. Like we get just stuck on this loop for hours. And finally I get tired of it. I'm like, after an hour, I'm like, I'm done doing this around thing. So I'm going to get upset with you, and I'm going to push you. Like I'm going to push you to the point where you actually just pop and break. That way you can cry and you can be upset, and then we can get this thing over with. And so like I'll push her. I'll be like, I'm like, you want to get mad? Fine, like get mad. Let's go. Like get it over with. Let's do it, And so now she's kind of to the point of where she won't actually like go over. Like this last time she won't go over. She'll be like, okay. She's like, okay. Like, okay, I want to listen. I want to help. She wants the help, but she can't take the help, right? Like it's that she's stuck between the two walls that she can't get through. But now she's finally coming around to like, I don't like the way I feel when I pop, and I totally melt down and I full scream for an hour and cry for an hour. I always tell her, I'm like, Jaden, I'm like, you are the one that's going to be hurt. I'm like, you're going to make yourself sick. I kind of started talking this to her just so she would have in her mind that when she does this, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, keep screaming. I'm like, you're going to make yourself sick. I'm like, this is you. You're going to be sick. You're going to feel horrible. You're going to feel like puking. You're going to have a headache. You're going to feel bad for the next day if you keep doing this. And so I'm kind of putting those thoughts in her brain. So when she starts doing these meltdowns, that like she's like, yeah, like I feel terrible. I feel horrible. So next time that thing comes up, she's thinking in her brain when she's pushing mom away and pushing me away, I go, fine, do it. Like blow up. Let's go. You're going to feel horrible. it's not going to be good for you. So now she's kind of starting to realize like, yeah, like that's not a good thing. Maybe I should make the choice to try to listen. That's the better option than just going full end off the deep end. So she definitely has come a long way. And in her reasoning, she's starting to, and I don't know if she's getting older or if it's, all the help she's been getting, but she's starting to be able to reason in her head logically about what's going on and recognize like, she said something to me the other day. She was like, I'm starting, she's like, I can tell like my brain, she goes, my brain is starting to get all crazy. And she was explaining to me what was actually going on in her brain. And she was recognizing it before it got to the blow up stage. So she could actually talk to me a little bit about it beforehand. And I could listen to her and kind of help her talk her through it about what's actually going on. So since we've taken that demand off, she has definitely been able to kind of recognize her own emotions and her own thought process and kind of be able to get a little bit of a grasp on that. She's not bashing the doors anymore. She's not, smashing stuff and throwing stuff around like she used to and destroying everything. So that there's definitely been progress, and there's definitely been a lot of life energy returned to us and the family. I feel like because like we have like maybe a week or two in between big blowups, even though every day is kind of like there's something frustrating every day that we're just like, oh, would you please stop? Like, give me a break already. Like, why do we got to do this from the second you wake up to the second you go to bed? You're constantly demanding everything. Like literally, I want, but I won't do anything, right? Like PDA is so funny because like they demand everything, but the little tiniest demand on them is like, whoa, like don't ask me anything. But because we're having these, and it's not, not that bad, I mean, because we're getting a break, but because we're having this, like the life is returning and we're starting to find a little bit more peace and a little more energy in life to be able to put that effort out into other things as well. And also to help, it also helps us be able to put more into Jaden. Just recently, Carissa is, as you guys probably know, she's starting up her own consulting business to help people with PDA with the same thing, because it's like Jaden is kind of starting to get on track, and we're starting to figure out what works with her and what doesn't, and where to push her and where to step back. And so it's opening up so much more energy in our lives. And the funny thing about it is because like from day one, she's been such a hassle and just like such an all-consuming ball of fire that takes every bit of life and energy out of you. When we have these little times in between, it is like, and we're starting to see a little light, is like, man, like we feel like we can do anything now. Like we got this kid that's just been consuming everything we have. Like, man, we can do anything, we got energy for anything once we can kind of get a little break from that. So there's definitely progress, and it's been really nice seeing that progress being made. And one other thing too that's been really nice, and she hasn't done it for a long time, is her brother. Like her brother, who's autistic as well. He's autistic on the other spectrum. So Jaden's on one side, and on the far PDA side, Steven's on the exact opposite side of the autism spectrum. So like he's completely different. And so it is just like she just gets on him and berates him and like is mad at him for everything, even though he didn't do anything. And so she's really taken her focus off of her brother and been willing to accept that like they can only play together for a small amount of time doing certain things, because if they don't, within an hour, there's always somebody or both of them's crying. Usually Steven's crying and Jaden is screaming, right? And so we're just like, Jaden, it's fine. You're not in trouble. Nobody's in trouble. It just didn't work out this time. Like, it's okay, And so now she stepped back off of, being mad at Steven for everything. She did have one a few weeks ago where she was upset. And I said to her, she was going on and on. I said, Jaden, I go, are you trying to pick a fight with me? I'm like, do you want to fight with me right now? Or do you want me to just listen to what you have to say because you're talking, because you need to get stuff out, right? And so she's like, I just need to talk. So I'm like, fine, complain about your brother, all your stuff, but I'm not going to argue with you about it, right? I'm just going to listen to you, right? So I'm like, do you want to fight, or are you just talking right now? So I'm like, okay, I'll listen. So she's talking about Steven. And I said, okay, are you done? She's like, yeah, I'm done. And then like 2 seconds later, she goes, well, how come? I'm like, oh, so you do want to fight? Okay. So I'm like, I'm going to tell you again for the 100th time why Steven and you are treated different, even though you don't want to hear it and you're going to be mad at me. Right. So that's gotten a lot better. And so we've kind of figured out how to manage those two together so they're, can be civil to each other and keep some peace there. So it's getting better for sure.
Our son is an only, so we don't have that dynamic there. But what you're talking about with Jaden feeling like she needs to pick a fight with you, I at least in our experience, I really feel like they're going to have this their PDA panic attack about and it's just going to happen, but they need to be able to push it to happen. If that makes sense, it's like it's going to happen. So at least with us, it's like, okay, let's just make sure everybody's safe and nothing's going to get broken, because that it's just something that has to happen. But like you, it's those times are just so much further from the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it is gradual, because at first it was like the first time we we're like, man, like it's been 2 weeks. Like we went 2 weeks and we haven't had a huge meltdown. I'm like, this is amazing. Like this PDA like program or whatever you want to call it, like it's actually working. Like we're actually getting some results out of it. And it was like, okay, like we got 2 weeks, and then it was a big meltdown. I was like, that's fine. Like I'll sit in bed with you and lay there while you cry for 2 or 3 hours. And so that's the other thing too, is it's kind of morphed into, before it was really screaming, a lot of just full throat, full, just like, whoa, screaming. And it's evolved more into like crying now. And I'm like, good. I'm like, yes, cry, please. Like, yes, I would rather have you crying than screaming. So it's kind of gone from screaming to crying more, even though she still is kind of like wants to fight and go round and around and around. When it finally does come to that big blow up, it's more of just a crying thing. And I'm like, okay, good. Like that, for me, that tells me that she's letting that emotion out probably in a better way by crying and just letting it out, and not getting angry. Because when you get angry, I think that's when the violence could come out, and the self-harm and the things like that. So I'm like, okay, this is good. This is a step forward. It's sadness, but it's not anger, and it's not that kind of hurt that that was there. So so that's been good.
Yeah. And I love too where you said how when she was complaining about Steven, you gave her the choice. Do you just want me to listen to you, or do you want to argue? That even that alone, for a dad to be, or a mom, but we're focusing on dads today, for a dad to be able to give their child that choice, and you literally stand there and give her the opportunity to complain to you. I know my dad probably wouldn't have given me the like, I'm not going to listen to you complain about your sister for an hour.
No way.
But you giving her, number one, you gave her a choice, which all of our PDAers need. You're acknowledging that, you're not dismissing her. And I think, a lot of parents would just dismiss it like, you know what, I'm not listening to this. This is ridiculous. But you let her do that. And so you're helping her learn coping skills, and then that is all going to evolve. It's like we've gone from screaming to crying, and then hopefully that's going to evolve into, even if she's crying, maybe it's going to be for a less amount of time, or maybe not as intense, or maybe it's going to turn into, I just need to lay on my bed and be sad, or snuggle my favorite stuffed animal or doll, whatever. But just from what you've talked about, I can tell that you're giving her a lot.
It's a safer,
it's a safe environment.
Safe, yeah, safe, and I would even say healthier.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. And so that's our thing. I'm like, that's fine. Like if you have issues and like whatever's causing you this anxiety, this frustration, like please, like get it out. But don't do the PDA thing with me where you're just going to keep going back and forth with it over and over and over. Like I think that time I let her talk, and it probably took her 15-20 minutes to say her whole piece. And then I jumped in, I said, okay, is that it? Are you good? Are we done? yeah, we're good. And then of course, 3 minutes later, she had to go back to it. And that's when I'm like, nope, like you ready to fight? Let's go. Like, it's on, like it's on, we're fighting now, And so I'm like, I'm totally fine with her talking it out. And I want her to do that because I want her to recognize like, those are emotions are valid, like, and she feels that way. And like, that's totally fine. Like you feel that way. That's you. Yes. Like you feel that way. That's fine. And you can talk to me about it, but I'm not gonna, in this case, like, I'm not gonna berate Steven, and I'm not gonna take things away from him. And I'm not gonna give you more things that I give Steven because you're upset about it. Right. Like I'm gonna listen to you and say, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm not going to go around in circles. Like I'm not going to do it. I'm done doing that.
Because you've given her that space and that ability, and her anxiety is lower, and she doesn't have to ruminate on, and because of that, you've been able to set those boundaries. People do ask us about, well, what about boundaries? And it's like, can't, when you're just starting this process, you can't set too many boundaries. But you've just illustrated beautifully on, when you've put that parenting work in, and their anxiety is lower, you can start building in those boundaries.
So yeah, and that's interesting too. You're talking about boundaries. So when we first took her out of school and we got her the iPad, and we're totally doing everything against what we naturally thought we should do as parents, I told her, I said, there is some things that I absolutely will not budge on, and I will go to war with you over it because I don't care. There is still some boundaries. And I think the two things you're going to go to bed on time. I don't care. Like you're not pushing it back 15 minutes every night for the next month. Like we're not doing that. I'll go to war with you on that. You're going to bed when I say you go to bed. You're not gonna, what was the other one? There was a couple. There's only like two things that I absolutely would not budge on. And so I think it was good to have those. Everything else is like, fine. You don't have to clean the room. You don't have to do the dishes. I'll make you your food. Like whatever it is, like I'll listen to you, whatever. But there was 2 or 3 things that I said, absolutely not. I don't care. I will fight you over it every time. And like, you're not going to win. Like, you're just not going to win. So know that. When you come against me, like
we call those non-negotiables in our house, and those for us it's a safety. Ours are more of a safety kind of thing with our son. But you're right. I mean, it's like these are things that we expect will happen or will not happen, and we can't accommodate there will be demands. It's just one of those things gonna happen. So
very, very minimum. I said there's like one or two, and they're not,
Nope. I mean, and every family has to decide for themselves what those non-negotiables are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say, is that you're able to keep a few of those in place because you've given up so many other things.
Yes.
That's why you can keep those in place. But also, it's clear just what you've shared with us, that you really have invested time and energy in building a trusting relationship with Jaden. And that's what we talk about all the time, is building that relationship. And then that's how she's willing, and lowering the demands. We always say build the relationship, lower the demands, or build trust. And that comes through having a relationship. And that's what's making her able to meet the very few demands that are in place. And I've noticed we're coming up on almost an hour here, which I can't believe it, but I was going to look through and see if there's any questions.
I haven't seen any questions. There's just been a lot of comments that people are living the same. Their experiences are just, the same. Again, it goes back to that common threads through all of this.
And validation, I think that's the other thing, is that a lot of PDA
Yes.
families are looking for, is that validation piece, because it can be like I don't know that you said this, but in the way you described it, it can be a lonely lifestyle because you feel like, no other people don't parent like this, or other people don't let their kids get away with this, or whatever the case may be. But I guess just as we wrap up here, is there anything that you would want, for maybe a dad that, is just learned of PDA, or they're more at the beginning of their journey, or maybe they've been on the journey for a bit, but they still haven't been able to, quite wrap their head around it. What advice would you maybe pass along to them that would be helpful?
Honestly, like I think the biggest thing is just patience, is just to have the patience with, with your kid and with your wife, especially because like it not only is it stressful with, with your PDA kid, but of course then like with your spouse, because like almost like every night, like me and Carissa have to talk about Jaden and what she did. And I get to the point where I'm just like, can we just not talk about Jaden tonight? Because literally like every night before bed, like that's all we talk about. And I'm just like, man, like that's so exhausting. And so just trying to have patience with, with your child, and then with your wife as well, because like it can stir up so much disagreement or division because you're both so frustrated with it that like you kind of take it out on each other, because like you can't really take it out on your kid, because like it doesn't do you any good. It really only makes it worse. So then like you kind of take it out on your spouse. So just having patience and love, and just without whatever's in you, as much as you have in you to have love and compassion and patience, to listen, to listen to the kid, to spend time with them. Right now I'm kind of in this mode where Jaden has been kind of pushing my buttons every day for almost 2 months now. And I'm kind of the point, like in this little time period where I almost don't even want to look at her or talk to her, because I'm just like, everything you say is frustrating to me. Like I love you to death, but like I almost can't even look at you, because I'm just like, I need a break. Like I need a break. You've been just nitpicking, picking for months at a time. And I think we're at the end of that. I think we're coming into a point now where she's not doing so much picking, but just knowing that like there's that ebb and flow. But you have to have that patience, and you got to have that love for your kid, and again also for your wife, because or your husband or wife, whatever. But because I feel like you're in it together, like you're two people, raising one kid that feels like you're raising 10. And so like you kind of have to be together on this thing, because if you're fighting with your spouse, like you're not going to make any ground. It's only going to make it worse. So coming together and just having that unified front, is kind of what we say, is like when she's disrespectful to my wife, then like I step in and I back up my wife 100%. And my wife does the same for me, especially in front of Jaden. Like she has to know she can't play one off the other, because most certainly she's going to try to play us if she can. So, and also letting go of some of that, some of that, like, I don't know if the word is pride, but some of that, like you guys were saying, is, your dad would be like, just like, go, like, leave me, like, I'm not listening to your problems, and I'm not listening to what you have to say. And, it's kind of that old parenting style that maybe worked in tougher times and with different generations. But with these kids, it's a totally different world. And it's a totally different, not only is it a different world we live in with all the technology and all these things we have there and the kids have access to, but because of these kids have these special needs, like the whole thing has been flipped upside down as far as like my life is concerned about parenting, what I thought, being a dad looked like. Like for me, this is more of being an emotional kind of a dad than a disciplinarian kind of dad. It requires me to be more of an emotional person, I guess. And I'm not really emotional person. I didn't grow up in an emotional household where, we ever talked about our feelings. Most of the time it was just, you stuff your feelings and you go work, basically that's how you live, and that's what you did. But it's kind of coming around to more of like, you have to be willing to engage in your child's emotions, because they're very intense most of the times. But then you also have to recognize your own emotions and learn how to deal with those, because like if you can't get a hold of your own emotions, what's going on, like it's going to eat you alive. And you're going to probably turn to other things that aren't super healthy, for yourself to be able to deal with it. So that's probably the best I got.
That was brilliant.
I would say that.
What more is there to say?
Okay. I mean, that's like the icing on the cake. You couldn't have Heather and I couldn't have written anything better for you to say, because you just, I think you said what every family needs to hear. And this isn't an easy lifestyle, but we do have amazing kids, and they do bring a lot to our families. It's just once we figure them out and figure out what they need and provide it, then that's when their awesomeness, truly, they're able to show us who they really are.
So that's one thing what you're saying is it's the cool, kind of the cool thing about this is they're so difficult, but going into this new world that we live in, they're so different and they think just so outside of the box that in my optimistic opinion and hopes, I feel like these kids are going to be something special, especially if you can get them when they're young and you can kind of start developing the right way of thinking and the right patterns of acting for them, that I feel like they have the potential to do some pretty awesome things that probably haven't been seen or done before. But it takes like some channeling of that and some recognition on their part, and to be able to take that and use it for something valuable and to do new things. So like with Jaden and all the energy all these kids have and the ideas they have, we met PDA girls over at our house last night. One of Carissa's friends, and you guys probably know her, Dusty, and her daughter Ava. But Ava was here and talking to Ava, and just she was like very similar. I had my back turned to her and she was talking, and I'm like, the things she was saying sounds so much like Jaden, but they have these just great ideas and these grand ideas and this way of thinking about things that's totally different. And I'm like, these kids are going places if they can just be taught and like nurtured in a way that they can flourish and not be like going down that road of destruction, like taking that flourishing path and not the destructive path. I think they can be awesome things. And I think my daughter Jaden, she has enough energy and enough personality that like she's going to do awesome things. It's just going to take a lot of work to get there. So
Harry Thompson said something, and I'm going to paraphrase this because I don't remember the exact words, but it was more like it was a discussion he was having about employment and PDAers because there was a lot of fear. And I'm going to make this real short. But anyway, he just said, let's figure out how to make the life that you want, as far as, what their futures are going to hold, or, what kind of employment they may have later on. But I think it's exactly what you said. This is a new world. This is let's just figure out how to take these gifts and support them in a way that they need to be supported.
Yeah,
absolutely. And Ava is my spirit animal. I'm just throwing it out there. I adore her so much. She's my spirit animal.
Well, thank you so much, Rick. We greatly appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And there's absolutely no doubt that what you've shared today is going to have an impact on dads, but also their families, because, I think once dads really get on board and realize that it's them that needs to change. When I say that, moms that need to change, rather than trying to change or fix our kids. Our kids are who they are. We just need to support them for who they are. And then they can be exactly what you're talking about. They're going to be these amazing human beings, but then they can live up to their full potential when they're supported in the way they need to be supported. And this conversation today, I think certainly is, just been really valuable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad I could share, and hope it helps some people get through this. Cause I know as soon as we found out about it, like I said, I'll say it again, but it was just a breath of fresh air. It was like, okay, we have some steps to put into place. We're moving forward. There's progress, and it's slow, but you see it. And that in and of itself is enough to keep you going. So it's, when people find out and actually know, it's good.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.
Rick.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you guys. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.